Okay, class, today we're going to look at this idea of continuing factoring. And if you look here, we're looking at 5-7, and it says we're factoring patterns 4, and our pattern is this. We've got x squared plus bx plus c. The key here is that my constant term is positive. If you remember last year in 7th grade, we used to do this x marks the spot, and that was very helpful to get you ready for what we're going to learn today. If we look here at my x marks the spot, if you notice I have two numbers. I have a 6 and a 5. Now what happened is I took two numbers and I multiplied them to get 6, and I took the same two numbers and I added them to get 5, and so your mission is to figure out what two numbers did I use. Well, if we realize here, then that meant I had to use 2 and 3, because when I multiply 2 and 3, I get 6, but when I add 2 and 3, I get 5. Now, we're going to look at this idea here of what we've been working on this week, and we're going to see that when I FOIL something, okay, I get this trinomial. But I can also take this trinomial and factor it and get my binomials back. So we've been seeing this week that factoring and multiplication or foiling are inverses of each other. So let's think about that for a second. If I have these two binomials right here, and this is my resulting trinomial, when I multiply, where did the x squared come from? What did we do in the FOIL process to get that x squared? Yes, that's right. We took the first, x times x, which gave me x squared. Now, where does that 5x come from? Where does that linear term come from in the middle? What part of foiling does that come from? Yeah, that's right. That's where we did the outside and the inside. Remember, we have 2x and 3x, and we collect like terms and we get 5x. Where does that constant term, that 6, come from in the foiling process? Yes, that's right. It comes from multiplying the constants together on the end. So we're going to see as we start this battle of factoring that I need to worry about two things. I need to worry about the factors of my constant term on the end, and I also have to really pay attention to the signs in my trinomial. Now, I've tried to break it down for you in a few steps, and let's look here. If I wanted you to factor x squared plus 11x plus 13, well, first of all, my quadratic quotient is always going to be 1. There's an understood 1 there. Okay, and my constant term is going to be positive. So C, the constant term, is going to be positive. So we're going to have to list the factors of the constant. Remember, I need the factors of the constant. We're going to find the pair of factors whose sum equals the coefficient of the linear term, the guy in the middle. We're going to look at the sign chart Mrs. Burton's going to teach you as we go, and then we're going to use this idea of x factoring to check the linear term. And again, we're back to where we have to check the middle. We've got to check the middle to see if we have chosen wisely. All right, so I have a little template that we're going to use for the first two to kind of help us think where we need to go. And so let me pull that up. Let's see. Okay, so this is my template. Now let's go ahead and write that first trinomial down on the last slide that we were going to factor. Okay, and it was this. It was x squared plus 11x plus 30. Now remember, in the bigger picture of things, we're working on this factoring honey-do list. And if you remember, the first rule of factoring is to check it out. Is there a GCF? So when I look at my polynomial here, GCF, no GCF. So we're going to say none, and then we're going to copy down the polynomial. So here it is. And now we've got to figure out the coefficients of my different terms. Well, what's in front of my quadratic term? It's an understood 1. What's in front of my linear term? It's an 11. What's my constant term on the end? It is 30. Okay, now remember I said we've got to know the factors of our constant term to help us factor. So let's list the factors of 30. We've got 1 and 30. We've got 2 and 15. We've got 3 and 10. And we've got 5 and 6. Did I get all of them? I did. Okay, so now I said the second thing we have to look at is our signs. Did you notice that both of the signs in my trinomial are plus? So I've got this little sign chart down here, and let's look at it. If C is plus, we're going to go here. And then since B is plus, the one in front is plus, we're going to go here. And so that tells me that both of my factors in my binomial have to be plus. So it's going to look like this, x plus something and x plus something. Now, we just need to go over and look at the factoring list and decide which two pairs of factors, if I add them together, will give me 11. Yeah, it's going to be 5 and 6. So it's going to be x plus 5 and x plus 6. Nice. Now, just to check it out for yourself, if you went ahead and foiled this right underneath there, you would get our original trinomial back. Now, let's try another one on our second template here. Okay, the second one I want you to write down and try is this. We've got x squared minus 10x plus 21. What do you see? That's a little bit different. Yeah, my signs are just a little bit different. But first question we always ask ourselves, is there a GCF? No GCF. Okay, so let's copy down what we've got left. 2x squared minus 10x plus 21. Okay, what is my quadratic term's coefficient? Well, for right now, it's always going to be an understood 1. Our b value this time is what? Negative 10. And our c value, our constant term, is 21. All right, let's list the factors of 21. We've got 1 and 21, and we have 3 and 7. Okay, so remember, we have to look at two things. We have to look at our factor pairs for the constant. And what was the second thing we have to look at? Yeah, we have to look at our signs. So if I look here, C is plus, so I'm right here. But this time, B, okay, the linear term is minus, so we're over here. And so that means that both of my factors in my binomial this time need to be negative. So it would look something like this. We'd have x minus something and x minus something. And then we go over here and we look at our pairs of factors. Which pair of factors, when I add them together, will give me 10, that middle number? It's got to be 3 and 7. So we get x minus 3 and x minus 7. Nice. Okay, and again, if you wanted to check it out and make sure you chose wisely, you could just do your foiling underneath there and you should get the original back. Now, let's take this idea and we're going to develop it into what Mrs. Burton calls the X factor. All right? And so let's go over here. If you look at my directions, it says factor, right, as a product. So we're going to take our trinomial, and when we get done, it should look like two binomials, okay? And we're supposed to check by multiplying the factors. So here's what we're going to do, okay? When I look at the first term, which is z squared, what are my factors of z squared? Well, that's got to be z and z, all right? Let's look at our signs. Did you notice that both of my signs in my trinomial are plus? So according to that sign chart just a minute ago, that means both of my signs are plus. And now I need the factors of 8. We've got 1 and 8 and 2 and 4. Okay? Which set of those factors will add up and give me 9? I need that linear term of 9. That's right, 1 and 8. And so we're going to have z plus 1 and z plus 8. Well, now we have to x factor. And remember, Mrs. Burton calls that's how we check the middle. Now, here's how we x factor. Okay, what we're going to do is we are going to cross multiply, and basically we're doing that outside-inside part of foiling to check the middle. So we'd say z times 8 is 8z plus 1 times z, which is 1z, and if I add those together, we've got 9z. Did you notice my middle checks? Okay, if my middle checks, then I like to say we have chosen wisely. I'm an Indiana Jones fan. Okay, so that means my answer would be the first binomial is z plus 1, and the second binomial is z plus 8. And then I promise if you FOIL them, you'll get the original back. Let's look at another one. Let's look at number 2. If we look at number 2, remember I have a trinomial, and when I get done, I'm going to have 2 binomials to multiply together. All right, so let's look. My first term is c squared. So what are the factors of c squared? Well, we've got c and c. Now, let's look at our signs this time. If you notice, the first one is minus and the second one is plus. And we saw just a couple minutes ago on the template that that means that both of my signs have to be negative. And now we need the factors of 16. So what are my factors of 16? We got 1 and 16. We've got what? 2 and 8, 3 and 6, and 4 and 4. Okay, so which pair of those factors, if I add them together, will give me that 10 in the middle? Yeah, it's got to be 2 and 8. So this is going to be c minus 2 and c minus 8. Now, got an x factor. X factor helps me check the middle. Every good algebra student, x factors to check the middle. So here we go. Remember, we're going to cross multiply. So we're going to do c times negative 8 is negative 8c. C times negative 2 is negative 2c. If I add them together, because that's what we do to like terms, I get negative 10c. So our middle checks, and our final answer here for our binomial is going to be c minus 2, c minus 8. And again, if you go through and you check that by foiling, you would get the original equation back. Seeming a little easier as we go? All right, let's try another. Let's look at number 3. Well, when I look at number 3, remember, I'm trying to find the 2 binomials that I can multiply together. So if I look at my first term, p squared, what are my factors of p squared? Well, it has to be p and p. What happens if we look at our signs? Did you notice the first one is minus and the second one is plus? And our sign chart told us that that's going to be, both of my binomials need to be negative. Now, I need to come up with factors of 13 that will equal 14. Well, there's only one set of factors for 13. It's prime. So it's going to be 1 and 13. And then we've got to x factor. We always check the middle. And I understand right now, this is easy. I can do it in my head. I get that. But in another day or two, we're going to add some different things in. And so it's just easier to learn how to do it on the easy stuff. So when we get to the hard stuff, it's just like second nature. Okay? So when I add those together, we get negative 14p. All right? So the middle checks. And so my binomial would be p minus 1, p minus 13. Good job. All right. Now, let's look at number 4. Can you do number 4 on your own? Let's see what would happen. Remember, I'm trying to come up with 2 binomials. What are my factors of n squared? Well, it's going to be what? n. If I look at my signs, both of these are plus. So both of my binomials need to be plus. Factors of 21, that will somehow give me that 10 in the middle. Well, that's got to be 3 and 7. Okay, we're going to x factor check the middle. We've got 7n plus 3n equals 10n. So the middle checks. And so our binomials would be n plus 3, n plus 7. Nicely done. All right, now, Let's look at number 5. If we look at number 5, we're going to go here and we're going to say, okay, Miss Burton, I know I need 2 binomials. And then my first term is s squared, so that's got to be s and s. And when I look at my signs, well, the first one's minus and the second one's plus, so that means both of mine need to be minus. And now we're going to list those factors of 40, okay? Now, we've got 1 and 40, and we've got 2 and 20, and we've got 4 and 10, and we've got 5 and 8. So when I look there, which set of those factors, when I add them together, will give me 12 in the middle? None of them will. That's right. So every once in a while, we're going to get to a polynomial, a trinomial that does not factor. And we're going to write the words prime. How do you know it's prime? When you list all the factors and you look at them, okay, there's no 2 set of factors that when I add them together is going to give me that middle number of 12. So therefore, it is prime. Okay? Now, we got one more to look at here on this slide. And how could we factor z squared plus 16z plus 39? Everybody try it on their own. And I'm going to put the correct answer up here so you can check and see if you got it right. Nice job. Okay, now let's look at number 7. What did I do different this time? Yes, did you notice that I've got a squared here and b squared back here? Well, we're still going to do the same idea. We just got to remember to put those b's on the end. So let's try one. If I look at my factors of a squared, it's got to be a and a. If I look at my signs, well, look, both of these signs are plus, so that means both of my signs need to be plus. What are my factors of 24? Well, 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. Which pair of those factors will give me the 10 in the middle when I add them? That's right, the 4 and the 6. So this is going to be 4 and 6. And because Mrs. Burton covered it up with her factors, but because there's a b squared here, I need to make sure I write b and b. Now, we got an x factor. We always x factor to check the middle. So here we go. We've got a times 6b is 6ab. We've got 4b times a, which is 4ab. If I add those together, those are my linear terms. The middle checks. And so my binomial would be a plus 4b and then a plus 6b. Very nice. All right. Let's see. Let's try one more. All right, let's look at number 8. Number 8. So we need 2 binomials that I multiply together. All right, so we know that the factors of m squared are m and m. We look at our signs. Both of these are plus, so both of mine are going to be plus. Now, we got to come up with factors of 51. So this is where those divisibility rules will come in. Because when I look there, well, I know it's 1 and 51, okay? Well, 2 won't go into 51, but 3 will, okay? And it's going to be 3 and 17. And hopefully you realize right there, when I add those together, I get 20. So that's where those divisibility rules are going to come in that we talked about earlier in the chapter. So we've got 3 and 17. Got an x factor, got to check the middle, always and forever. So this is going to be 17m, and this is going to be 3m. And so my middle does check. We have 20. Oh, Mrs. Burton forgot to put the ends on the box. Okay. All right, so here we go. We've got m plus 3n, and then we've got m plus 17n. Okay, so for homework, make sure you remember your sign patterns and your factors. Great job.